In an earlier and very popular video, I described what a Gantt chart is in under 5 minutes. But I keep getting asked the question, but Mike, how do you create a Gantt chart? So that's what I'm going to describe in this video. A lot of people will think that creating a Gantt chart starts with first, open the app. But it couldn't be further from the truth. And in this video, I am going to make no assumptions about the tool that you will use to help you create your Gantt chart. That tool could be anything from a pencil and paper to a drawing tool like PowerPoint to a slightly more sophisticated tool like a spreadsheet. Or possibly it's a dedicated project management tool like MS Project or Gantt Pro. Or possibly it's a full-on project management information system. It doesn't matter. The basic process is the same whichever approach you take. And that process has 9 steps. And the first step is to list all of the tasks or activities that you need to carry out. The first place to start is with your work breakdown structure. And whether you use your work breakdown structure to break down the products or the tasks of your project, it doesn't matter. It's a great place to start. If you've used it to create your products, you'll need to do another step to go from product to task. If you've done a task-based work breakdown structure, then you already have your list of tasks organized and grouped in a helpful way. You need a detailed list that covers everything, and you want it grouped logically, possibly in phases, or possibly functionally, or possibly already into work streams. And if you want to know how to create that work breakdown structure, then I'll put a link below to our video on how to create a work breakdown structure. Secondly, set up your constraints. Do any of your tasks have a necessary start date or a necessary completion date that you need to respect? If they do, make sure you note that information. Third, set your task dependencies. Which tasks are dependent upon other tasks? Most commonly, this will be what we call a finish to start dependency. That is, the start of one task is dependent upon the finish of another, hence finish to start. Other dependency types are available, and I talk about those in our video on task dependencies. There are finish to finish dependencies, start to start dependencies, and start to finish dependencies, which are vanishingly rare. Once you have your dependencies, there are 2 things that you can do. And the first is to establish any leads or lags. A lag is what it sounds like. In the case of a finish to start dependency, a lag is the time between the finish of one task and the start of another task which is dependent upon it. If there is no lag, then the second task starts immediately upon the finish of the first, but if there is a lag of 3 days, it will start 3 days later. And a lead is the opposite of a lag. It's a negative lag. So a finish to start dependency with a 3-day lead means that the second task will start 3 days before the expected completion of the first task. Why does this matter? Well, the commonest situation is lags arising from curing or drying times. If you paint a coat of paint on your wall, you can't put the second one on until you finish the first one. But often there is a lag because you need to let the first coat dry properly. The second thing you can do once you have dependencies is to sequence the tasks within a group, within a work stream, within a phase or a functional grouping. That way, you've got a logical structure to feed into the Gantt chart that you're going to be building. Fourth, We need to allocate resources to our tasks. We need to identify the right people to do the job. We need to discuss it with them, and we need to confirm those allocations. Remember, where 2 tasks have been allocated to the same person, then those 2 tasks can't happen at the same time unless you specifically allocated that person part-time into each of them. So allocating resources to tasks is critical for understanding the sequencing and the scheduling of tasks. Once you know who's going to be working on each task and how much of their time you're going to apply, the next step is to estimate the durations of each task. You need to be mindful of the balance between your desire to push things along as quickly as possible and therefore to estimate the lowest possible duration, and the importance of allowing enough time for people to figure out what it is they're doing and to deal with problems and setbacks along the way. At step 6, you prepare by creating your Gantt chart template or grid. And a Gantt chart grid consists of rows, each of which represents an individual task, and columns, which represent a unit of time, either days or weeks, sometimes months. You can even make them more granular, representing hours, but we don't often do that. And once you've done that, I recommend that you block out right from the start any weekends, holidays, or other unproductive time so that you don't allocate work into those slots inappropriately. Now, I'm not saying you can never work on a weekend, but you need to only plan to do this knowing that it's a decision that you've made and the right thing to do. Remember, if you allocate work into non-productive time, that gives you absolutely zero contingency. So think very carefully before you do it. Step 7 is simple. You've got all the data. Now you need to add your activities onto your Gantt chart grid to create your Gantt chart. And at step 8, you need to add milestones to your Gantt chart too. Now, you can determine what your milestones are going to be right at the beginning of your planning process. These milestone-driven projects or milestone planning set up a framework of milestones that create the constraints within which you plan the activities. And we have a video on milestone planning. I'll put a link below. Alternatively, you can select your milestones from the completion dates of important activities or important groups of activities. And of course, you can always do a combination of both. And I do have other videos on milestones for you to watch. Links below. And finally, at step 9, make your Gantt chart as useful as possible. Apply color coding and shading to make different tasks stand out. But remember, photocopiers are colorblind, so if you're going to use color, make sure you use shading as well, so that anyone who can't easily read color can still distinguish between the tasks. You can also use colors or labels to assign resources to tasks to make it easy for people to find out who is doing what. And you may want to add arrows to indicate dependencies between tasks. Finally, an additional part of this step, which is essential before you finish making your Gantt chart as useful as possible, is to add a key or a legend to your Gantt chart. Because if you have used some form of coding, there are no standards. Therefore, for anyone to be able to read and interpret your Gantt chart, they have to know what the different symbols mean. And if you don't provide it for them, it's not their fault, it's yours. Gantt charts are the poster child for project management, but they are only one part of the larger project planning process. And if you want to know how they fit in, do take a look at our video on the project planning process and how it works. If you've enjoyed and learned from this video, please do give it a like. And I'll be creating loads more great project management content, so please do subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you don't miss any of it. and I'll look forward to seeing you in the next video.